You've tuned into Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes. Your access to success strategies and more to help you move onward and upward with your life. Listen in each week as she interviews others who have really taken their essence to the next level and truly unpaused their life. Now here's your host, Dr. Cali Estes.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is Dr. Cali Estes, and I am founder of the Addictions Academy, the Addictions Coach, and Rehab Rescue. Welcome to Unpause Your Life. This is a great podcast where we showcase people who have done something extraordinary with their life. I welcome you, and I hope you enjoy all of our guests.
On my way, found a reason to wake up another day.
Before we get started, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters.
All the things that you won't do.
Did you know 81% of Americans would like to become a published author? Chances are you might be one of them. What's stopping you? Writing and publishing a book takes a lot of work and is expensive, right? Well, not anymore. For your next book project, or even your first, team up with Hassle-Free Books. They make it so easy to become an author. They remove all of the fuss and struggle and make it smooth and simple. And it's far more affordable than you could ever imagine. Go to hasslefreebooks.com and use promo code UNPAUSE to receive a 10% discount off of any book project. Get started right away and become a published author in as little as 45 days. For your free 1-hour book formula guide, which will show you just how painless it can be to become an author, head to hasslefreebooks.com today.
All right. Thanks again for joining me. Let's get started with today's show.
Took a walk down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go.
Welcome to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes of the Addictions Coach and the Addictions Academy. My guest today is Jeffrey Lynne Esq. And attorney Jeffrey Lynne is a law partner in a multi-county Florida law firm of Beighley, Myrick, Udell and Lynne, with a Boca Raton-based consulting practice focused upon zoning, real estate, business structuring, marketing, licensing, regulatory compliance, and litigation in the substance use disorder treatment and sober living residence provider spaces. That's a mouthful. Welcome, Jeffrey. How are you?
Hi, Callie. Thank you very much.
Now, in simple terms, tell us what you do.
Basically, my core competency is zoning and regulatory work, ethics compliance work for treatment providers and associated recovery residences. That's not really what I started doing. I started simply, I had a client walk in the door one day and they were being what they felt discriminated against by a city down here that will go unnamed. And they were being discriminated against. And we tried to speak reason to the city, but I stepped quickly into this entire world of substance use disorder, treatment, private treatment, nonprofit treatment, recovery residences, sober homes, marketing, interventionists, regulations, and recognize that the cities and counties and states just did not operate at all on this level. They didn't understand it. I didn't understand it. So in order to be a better advocate for my clients, I started to learn it. And the more I learned about it, being someone who's not a recovery myself, I guess the pejorative word is I'm a normie, right? I started to recognize the absolute fundamental need to have a robust and healthy substance use disorder treatment industry or economy that has historically been in Florida. So I saw this pushback for the wrong reasons, and most importantly, as the opioid epidemic really took root down here as it did in the country. And I saw our public policy going in one direction and our public health needs going in another direction. And I could have done one or two things. I could have said, not my problem, move on. But I saw an opportunity to make a difference and be involved and try to elevate the discussion beyond, the patient brokering ethics questions that pervade all of healthcare, but to really address that issue with elected officials, civic groups, professionals like yourself and try to start creating some collaboration so that we can all collectively, we all have a common enemy, and that is addiction. So we're all on the same page. I think people, though, were starting to get sidetracked based upon, not wanting to deal with those addicts or those providers or those interventionists. It's always those people.
Right.
And that's how I got started. And today I represent hundreds of treatment providers across the country, doing all of their work, even some of their non-treatment related work, commercial real estate, anything having to do with anything in law is what I do. I just happen to have this, I can't say specialty, I'm not allowed, but I have this extensive knowledge, and experience going back many, many years, specifically in this space, and also being located in Palm Beach County, which really is, the recovery capital,
Right.
in a positive way, of the United States.
Okay, so let's talk about specifically patient brokering in Florida, because I know patient brokering isn't everywhere, and I know a lot of different places you can, pay per patient, you can pay bonuses, but in Florida specifically, they passed a law, and if you could tell us about that law and what that means for treatment centers and providers in the state of Florida, that would be fantastic.
Not only will we address the law, but I want your listeners to also know that the state attorney's office for Palm Beach County, that's really been in charge of what the state called the Sober Home Task Force, which really is about a task force to look at the entire industry, just released a legal memorandum about patient brokering, which is important. And so I'll tell everyone what it is and how it came to be. But the fact that they just released on December 6th, 2017, an opinion on what patient brokering is, to me, just further demonstrates that while the law is the law and there's no ignorance of the law, there wasn't sufficient guidance or direction in this space to have your average treatment provider, business owner, or anybody really understanding what the ground rules are. So that being said, what the Patient Brokering Act in Florida is a law that it's modeled after federal law, and it's an expression of healthcare policy that we don't want physicians or healthcare providers buying patients, because if they can buy patients, then it corrupts their medical judgment, or if they make money on that. We want our doctors and healthcare providers, including treatment providers, to focus on the patient and having a patient-centric approach towards their healthcare. If they can buy patients, then, and I say buy, they're not bartering in them like, the old slave trade of the 1800s, but by inducing a patient to choose you as a healthcare provider, not because you're good, but because you gave them something of value, or you pay someone else to steer patients towards you, that is deemed to lower the quality of care for drug and alcohol treatment.
I totally understand that, because I've been doing this 23 years now. I always say 21, and then I realize how old I really am. And it's always been referral based. I give you a client, you give me a client. I give you a client, you give me a client, and we don't exchange any money or business or gift cards or anything like that. And somehow that model went from that to gift cards as a thank you, flowers and cookies. And next thing you know, it's money. And next thing you know, different people are stealing each other's clients at Starbucks and going into treatment centers as patients and taking them with them. And it kind of got a little crazy. So I understand why they did what they did. Where do you see this going?
I'll tell you why it's a complicated answer. It's not an easy answer. That's because healthcare general healthcare, you go see a doctor, is not governed by the same set of business economic rules that rather regular businesses. If you want to open a restaurant, you go open a restaurant. So long you pass a Department of Health inspection, you serve food, and if your food's good, people come back. If your food's bad, people don't come anymore. You can put up billboards, you can give them coupons, you can do buy one, get one free. You need to market and brand your business to get people in there. And a restaurant, by way of example, is very much word of mouth or even, online reviews. Other businesses, it's straight up advertising and whatnot. Healthcare, and not even addiction healthcare, but regular healthcare is not allowed to play by those same rules, because you can't do anything to induce a patient. So in regular healthcare, you have all these rules, but they work because in regular healthcare, you have natural economic controls in place. Like if you're a large institution like a hospital, you can't have a hospital on every corner. there are rules that prohibit the number of hospitals you can have so that those healthcare providers don't have to compete amongst patients. The patients, like if something happens to any one of your listeners right now and they call 911, they're going to, the hospital. Let's say, no, I want to go over there. The ambulances could take them to the closest hospital without their choice. And the hospital has to do nothing to get that patient. They don't have to do anything because the patient's automatically being driven to them. So they don't have to focus on differentiating themselves as, say, an emergency room or a hospital or other things, particularly if that's where their doctor has privileges at. When you start getting into addiction healthcare, you have a multiple set of problems. One is if a listener or anyone who's out there, themselves or a loved one has an addiction problem, who are they going to call? You can't go to your doctor. Well, we should be, but if you go to your doctor and say, listen, most people aren't saying, hey, I have an addiction, please help me. It's just not the way it is anymore. It's not like the old days when people hit bottom, realized they hit bottom, got themselves either into a treatment program or right into an AA meeting and worked on from there. They may have had an interventionist get involved to say really help facilitate through the family getting that person to admit they had a problem. But ultimately that person had to pick themselves up by their bootstraps and get themselves help. In the modern day epidemic of addiction, specifically with opioids, that has a different impact upon the neural network and dopamine in the brain system. These kids, these people on heroin, they're not bad people, but they're on a drug that they're not motivated to get better because why should they? Hitting bottom wasn't, hey, I've been a lawyer for 30 years with a drinking problem, and now I realize my alcoholism is consuming me. These are people who are between 18 and 30 who may have dropped out of high school or fallen out of college or whatever, and are just as satisfied living in bliss under the guise of heroin than getting help. And what's happening is they're then overdosing. So ambulances are picking them up, taking them to the emergency room, and then being discharged. Because the hospitals, there's no system in place to treat them. As opposed to if you got into a car accident, you'd go to the hospital, they'd take you there, they'd put you in their surgical center. Like all of a sudden you're getting a bill, right? All of a sudden for healthcare providers, you chose none of.
Right.
But in addiction space, you now need help. So how are you going to find a doctor? And that's how patient brokering really got a foothold specifically in addiction care. Because how were providers going to advertise themselves to the marketplace on a fair and equal playing field? And how are consumers of that healthcare service, parents, ones, the addicted, going to be able to choose a legitimate treatment provider? And because, nobody who, you always face addiction the first time. So it's not like you can go knock on your door and say, listen, you have a recommendation for a good treatment center for me? Like, people don't do that. It doesn't work that way. And overwhelmingly, people are not seeking treatment where they live. They're going elsewhere to change their setting. And there's some, psychological evidence that that's imperative. There's some just cultural imperative that's just the way it's done. So people are not even going to their local treatment center. They're leaving where they're going. And where do you go? You have 50 states. That is where the patient brokering takes a foothold, because now you have people out there who hold themselves out as being guides. We used to call them interventionists. And there are some very credible interventionists, you being one of them, in this country. But for every one of Cali Estes, for every other interventionist, there's 1,000 people out there who just got out of treatment, who are these kids with tattoos, who, I'm not begrudging them, but another kid with a tattoo has a drug problem, it's more likely to listen to that guy than to you or me. And they're like, oh, no, I got a great treatment program for you. And that marketer is selling that patient to that treatment center. And the patient is willingly going along with it because either they individually don't know, or you have a parent or loved one more likely who is in a crisis state because their child just got released from the emergency room. They are told, we can't help you. We can't make any referrals to you. We don't know what to do. Which, by the way, we're trying to change in the state here. That failure right there, we're trying to change in Florida. But that's another conversation. And so patient brokering has been allowed to flourish because there's really been no other viable mechanism that is cost effective.
We've got another problem on top of this now. So with the state's way of regulating, with the patient brokering, they've done a lot of news reporting. And we've seen all these big people go to jail. We saw Kenny Chapman get busted. I mean, he was drugging his patients, he was pimping them out, et cetera, et cetera. Well, for every one Kenny Chapman, there's 10 really good treatment centers that aren't on the news. So what we're seeing on my side is people are saying, wow, treatment in Florida is bad, period. And we start to have these advocates or these momvocates, as they call themselves, the mother of the child who went to Florida. And
I call them terrorists, but that's okay.
Okay. So you've got these ladies with no training who don't understand addiction, who don't understand the industry, all of a sudden talking about treatment centers like they have inside information. And they're rallying up each other with crazy stuff. And now they're slamming treatment centers that actually are good providers that are losing clientele because a mom posted something that wasn't even accurate. And I've been on the receiving end of that. I went toe to toe with the vigilante moms they didn't like the fact that the way I marketed. And I said, because I do a lot of social media marketing, we do a lot of posts. They didn't like it. And I said, you know what? Your opinion of me is none of my business. And they didn't like that either. So it's like we've got this issue with patient brokering. We've got marketers that can't market now legally. And now we have this whole other issue of the slander and the bullying, flat out bullying online. So what do you see law-wise getting prepared for that kind of a thing? Because that's damaging the credibility of really good treatment centers and good providers.
Yeah, you have, wow. And the reason I'm saying wow is because this has become the new, what I call cannibalization of the industry within itself. People that all think, they're well-intentioned, but they're all very dogmatic. I have a great saying in my office: "My karma will run over your dogma," and it's that these born again, self-righteous people who, by the way, in their heart of hearts, feel that they are doing the right thing and are doing God's work. But so are the people who strap bombs to their chest in Jerusalem and blow themselves up, for jihad. They're not killing anyone, but their ends do not justify their means, notwithstanding how well-intentioned they are. And what is happening, and the reason I'm not laughing, but I'm smiling right now at the irony or the timing is I receive calls all the time. I got one just last night. I have a voicemail right here from a mother who called me and said, "I got your name, Mr. Lynne. I need your help. My son has been in and out of treatment centers, and he seems to be listening to this self-proclaimed advocate, and I'm not really sure what to do because she's now telling my son that I, the mother, am the problem." I'm just like, holy cow, it's just that kind of thing is happening more and more. And then the reason we say moms groups, there's fathers involved too, but it just statistically tends to be more females, mothers that are doing this than fathers and males.
Yeah. To combat this, the lack of education, like right there, if you're an advocate, you don't ever give advice like that. Even from a professional standpoint, I won't say your mother's the problem. I will say, let's get you help, and then let's see what's going on with mom. You never say that to someone. So you've got that major issue happening. So we created a family coaching training program to actually get these advocates some training because they're not understanding addiction and they're not understanding what to say. And, you don't turn the family against each other. You need the family support.
And on that point, you asked the legal question. What we're trying to do, I'm a member of the Palm Beach County Sober Home Task Force, which was legislatively created to create the laws, look at the laws, rewrite the laws. And one thing we're looking at, and laws take time to develop. They don't happen overnight. It's a sausage-making process where what you enter on one side comes out differently on the other, or you got to then fix it. You have then this level of person, a peer support specialist, which is really taking on a lot of positive news lately, and I support it, about they're effectively what, the word advocate would be, to advocate, to represent. These people don't need advocates. These people need peer specialists. They need peers to help guide them through the recovery process, whatever that means, but they cannot start opining as to the quality of a treatment program with having no basis to say so. If there are statistics out there that someone wants to say, yes, this treatment program, this hospital, this doctor, this is all their records, here's the health grades kind of thing, they're going merely off of reputation, as well as if you're not their friend, if you're not in their inner circle, then you don't belong and you are bad and their friends are good. Well, again, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And that's the problem, is that lack of objectivity, coupled with some really guerrilla warfare type of media campaigns they've engaged in, has led them to getting sued, has led to cease and desist letters, and they view receiving that as a badge of honor. That, we're doing our work because the industry's coming against us. We're like, no, you're hurting everybody. And there's no, outside of a private lawsuit to shut these people down, there's currently nothing regulatory in place, because there is a free speech component. But let me go back to an issue you brought up, to answer the complete question. Well, you're talking about the bad media. Unequivocally, there's been nothing but bad media coming out of this, but there's never good media coming out of anything. I had asked the Palm Beach Post 2 years ago, as well as the local South Florida Sun Sentinel, the two papers that, outside of Miami, why do they keep reporting news, including the local network stations? Why do they keep reporting all the negative stories? And whenever they report the negative story, the first thing they say is, this industry is corrupt, and let me tell you what happened. This industry is corrupt, let me tell you what happened here. This industry is corrupt, and let me tell you what happened over there. Why do you keep going there? Or why do all your pictures of your stories always have a needle and a spoon? Yeah, I understand, but why do you do that? And their response is very honest to me. They said, Jeff, I'll tell you why. The news itself has become corrupted, and they're honest about this. Like, we no longer have the money to do true journalism anymore. No one's buying papers anymore, so no one's putting ads in papers anymore. And ads and advertisements in papers is what drove the economy, well beyond just selling the newspaper, to be able to pay good reporters to do good journalism. It also then gave us the opportunity and luxury of doing these feature pieces on a good provider. Today, everything's on the internet. And so they look at what people click on by story, because the pay-per-click, so to speak, if someone clicks on a certain story, they then recognize that those kind of stories generate more visibility, and they can then charge more internet advertising for those kinds of stories. Well, guess what kind of stories generate the most traffic? Things that are salacious, things that are when people get arrested, or stories that reaffirm someone's narrative about what reality is. And that narrative is that addicts are bad, treatment centers are bad, the entire industry is corrupt and needs to be kicked out, which led to a friend of mine, who's state attorney Dave Aronberg, getting on the Megyn Kelly show on NBC and being misquoted as, his quote was, taken out of context, he says, and I believe him 100%, was, you could find it, he says, this isn't a case of one bad apple spoiling the bunch, the entire bunch is spoiled. And we said, wait, hold on a second, Mr. Aronberg, are you saying the entire industry is corrupt and wrong? And he had to backtrack and explain himself, because that's not what he meant. But that got on national news, coupled with cities in Florida taking advertisements out in other cities saying, don't send your kids to Florida, they'll come home in a body bag. Now, those cities and these statements that are being made were not made to necessarily protect those people from getting harmed, because there's medical harm and abuse all over the country. In my opinion, in my legal experience in doing this for multiple years, I've been a lawyer for 20 years now, is that this was a tactic used by the municipalities who have constantly, in court, against me and others, fought treatment centers and sober living residences and addicts from even being in their city. It'd be similar to suing African Americans because they don't want blacks in their cities. And they took that tack, and we combated them with the Fair Housing Act and the American Disabilities Act. So, by the way, you've been doing this long enough, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Councilwoman, whatever. That's why we passed the ADA in 1990. That's why we passed the Affordable Care Act in 2010. That's why we passed the Parity Act in 2008. That's why we amended the Fair Housing Act in the 60s and 88 to stop you from this behavior. You can't do this anymore. So they found another route, is that so then we did start finding criminal activity, and it had to be rooted out like any other criminal activity does, specifically when it has an impact on public health. And they use that as their, raison d'etre. They use that as their reasoning, as their basis. See, we told you so. So they are utilizing the limited activity in the space to say the entire industry is bad. So I'll shut up now with a shameless plug. We decided to create, or I decided to be a part of an organization called the National Recovery Council that has recognized that the reason we're losing the entire battle over addiction treatment is because we're losing the messaging war. And by the way, we've always lost the messaging war. And there's the NAACP that represents people of color. There's the Anti-Defamation League that represents people of Jewish heritage. There's all these organizations across the country. This, the Southern Poverty Law Center that represents people and speaks as a unified voice. There is no unified voice speaking for the afflicted. And so as a country, we have historically discriminated and been prejudiced against those people. So the National Recovery Council was created to go timeout. That's getting us nowhere. It's now against public policy. It's 3 steps backward and 1 step forward. And it's all about messaging. It's about educating elected officials. And it's about the industry finally having a place to go to say, that's where I want to put my money, because those people are not just lobbying for legislation or aren't just lawyers or whatever. They're actually taking a cohesive approach and a comprehensive approach to changing the messaging so that someone like Cali Estes or any of your friends could proudly say, yes, I work in the addiction treatment field. I am saving lives. What do you do for a living? And that's where we need to be, because the economy, honestly, is just too great. It's too significant in Florida and across the country. The industry employs tens of thousands of people at well above average wages. Salaries are anywhere from like the $30,000 to the $80,000 for workers, depending on where you are. They're all very educated. They have as many letters after their name as you do and I do. And they simply want to be treated with respect and do what their life's mission is, which is to help the addicted. It's not they're going there because of the money. They're going there because that's where their passion lies. Be it we demonize them or we demonize the afflicted.
I'm glad you said that.
There are a lot of things happening.
I am glad you said that, and I'm gonna piggyback off of that. So I'm from Philadelphia. I came down to Florida, and a master's level qualified therapist down here makes about $42,000, puts in about 60 hours a week at a treatment center. Up north, it's a lot higher. It's 60 or 80. But our paychecks, we top out, even with, that kind of a thing down here at 50 grand. So I tell people, if I wanted to make millions of dollars, the addiction industry would not have been the one I stepped into. I would have stepped into technology. So people seem to think that we are making money off the afflicted. So I hate that. And the other day I was on Facebook and I was posting something, and a gentleman had said, I can't believe you are making money off the heroin epidemic. And I simply posted, I've been doing this 22 years. 22 years ago, there wasn't a heroin epidemic. So this isn't all of a sudden a jump shot career for me. This is something I've always done. And for a lot of us, we have a lot of passion to help people. And that has gotten lost with the media portraying the industry as evil to the general public. So we have people out there saying things like, don't call this person or that person, or this doesn't work or that doesn't work, without the knowledge base of the evidence-based practice to see what actually works. So I'm really glad that you have this National Recovery Council coming out to educate people on what addiction is, what you need to do, what works and what doesn't work, because we have so many new ways to treat it now. It's not just go to a meeting and go to treatment. There's so many programs out there. And I've been interviewing all different ones. There's a program coming out that they treat the addicts and they take them through a Navy SEAL training. And they break them down and build them up now. There's high sobriety out there, which says you could smoke weed, but you can't do other drugs. There's Evo, which is treating it like a mental health issue and not an addiction. So there's all these things now and all these different treatment centers, including coaching, that are out there that the public needs to know about, that the afflicted and the addicted need to know about. And they need to say, well, this didn't work. Let me try that. So it's awesome you guys have that. I'd like to get more information on that when we're off the call. But let's do this.
And for anyone who's listening, it's the current website is National Recovery Council, is COUNCIL. .com. There are some names you may recognize on there. There are other people behind the scenes that are highly well regarded. We get calls from Congress people all the time asking us for information. We've been asked if we were interested to testify before Congress on these issues, because this is just an issue that we can no longer keep demonizing. It's beyond that. But yet there are still plenty of people, elected officials included, who will tell you, well, they chose to stick that needle in the arm. I'm like, that's like saying I chose to get cancer. And to your point, I don't know. I'm sure they exist. I don't know of a single oncologist that works for free.
Yeah.
If you want to have the best and brightest working on your behalf, then you have to pay them. And that you bring up that point. I never understood that. Why is it of all medical fields, all healthcare fields, of all things, and even churches and temples, you got to pay dues there, but they don't offer God for free, right?
Right.
So why is this different? And someone brought something to my attention I found very interesting. And I think it has to do with the metamorphosis that the entire, I don't want to say industry, it sounds like a factory, the entire space, the entire paradigm is morphing from. And that morph is going from healthcare not wanting to touch this because it wasn't medical. It was, you're an addict, you have a social problem, get yourself together, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, which by the way is very American, self-responsibility and reliability. We're not taking care of you. We're not a welfare state. If you can do it, do it. It's only for those who really, really can't do it are we going to help ourselves. So you have that underlying public policy that pervades economics and everything is, hey, you were an addict, sorry for you, bad for you, whatever, go find God on your own. So then starting to progress later on, starting in part with, Hazleton in Minnesota, a little bit about starting to medicalize this and recognizing that there's a group therapy dynamic to this, that there's child of origin issues, that there might be psychiatric issues involved. And again, brain sciences and psychiatrists are even still considered the stepchild of medicine. I have many friends I've met through this space who are psychiatrists who will tell you that, yes, they were not deemed peers of their medical classmates because they wanted to get involved with psychiatry. They were mocked. But because we haven't been able to study the brain the way we've been able to study other parts of the body. We've been able to cut open the human body, see an enlarged heart or a clogged artery or something and fix it. You can't cut open the brain and go, oh, I see the problem. It's taken technology. And so we're now morphing, rightfully so, and finally into a space where we can look at addiction through functional MRIs as a true brain science. And we can start using medications to offset maybe chemical imbalances. However, that's where we are today. Where we started with was get yourself into an AA or NA meeting, and if you need to, go live in a sober living residence. So you have practically generations of people that have gone through that, and because it worked for them, they believe it works for everybody else, and there's no money to be made. And so what someone brought to my attention I wasn't aware of is that one of the 12 steps, or actually one of the 12 traditions, I believe, is, and I'm going to paraphrase, is you are not to make any money off of spreading the word of God, of AA. This is not a money-making venture. This is purely an altruistic venture. You are to give back to the community and ask for nothing in return. I get that, and I respect that, and it does prevent the corruption of the message. However, there are plenty of people for whom either NA or AA or any of those kind of fellowships are just not attractive to them, or they really have a psychiatric issue, and the drug misuse is simply, covering that up, and it needs to be determined after detox. Oh, you really aren't just having a drug addiction problem. You have an underlying psychiatric disorder, psychological disorder, or you need intensive therapy because you were beaten by your father as a child. So you have right now this metamorphosis in the paradigm of the old guard saying, this is how we did it, this is how we're going to do it, this is how it's to be done, it's all nonprofit, it's all non-governmental entities, and you do it this way. And then you have the private sector who came about because the public sector was only dealing with the uninsured and the indigent, and they weren't paying their staff very much because they didn't have money, so you weren't getting the best and brightest anyway. The best and brightest healthcare professionals weren't going to addiction medicine. They couldn't heal the patient, and they weren't making any money. Now that there's money in addiction care through the Affordable Care Act, and by the way, it wasn't like someone decided, hey, let's throw money to addiction care because we're going to create a whole industry. It's because our government, our policymakers, through testimony and otherwise, recognized, this is the Democratic Party that helped shepherd through the Affordable Care Act, recognized that there is a need, a demand for the private sector to be involved in this space. There's a need for private interventionists to be involved. Because why? Because only through profit motivation do you innovate. There is no incentive to innovate through the government sector or government funded sector because you get your money, you're told how to spend it, you do your job, and that's it. It's like being a government employee. I used to be one, but as a government employee, you're told not to ask questions, not to think. Here's your job, you do it. It's taxpayer money. This is how it's spent, and that's it. The private sector innovates and goes, wait, if I can do well by doing good, isn't that what America's all about? But yet, like you just said, that is the first thing that gets demonized by these mother advocates and the public in general, that addiction care should all be free. And I think that not only is that unfair, but I think that's short-sighted because we're never going to cure the addiction epidemic without a profit motivation for people to innovate the next level and generation of care. No differently than the pharmaceutical companies were motivated by profit to create medicines to help stave off cancers or eliminate cancers. They didn't do that out of the graciousness of God and because they thought they were going to have the pearly gates were going to be open to them. They did because there was profit motivation. Now they did it because they're trying to heal people. I am equally frustrated, therefore, that people, I've been called an enabler myself. People, you're an enabler. You represent those people. You're allowing them to do what they want. No, I'm trying to help these people that are trying to do well by doing good be able to fulfill their own destinies. And that is equally why I get frustrated as you do about how you have these individuals out there that just have a misguided concept of what healthcare is or what it should be and how it operates. And why are we still stuck in the 1950s paradigm of treating addiction? It's 2017. It's about to be 2018. We really haven't progressed all that much. We're trying to, but the second you then try to, from a for-profit perspective, then everyone comes out of the woodworks and challenges you as being the devil.
And
that has to stop.
It's not just the public. It's actual other therapists and other interventionists and other counselors going against each other because they don't like them taking a profit share. When I came out with the Addictions Academy 5 years ago, one of the biggest interventionists who's on all the major TV shows as their interventionist, quote unquote, came out online and said I was dangerous, I needed to be stopped, and I should die, literally on Facebook. And I'm thinking to myself, you're supposed to be a colleague. You're supposed to be a professional. Who puts that on Facebook? And I hit him up privately, and he ranted and raved and what have you, and I ended up suing him because I said, this is ridiculous. You cannot do this. You're supposed to be a professional. You have to act like a professional. That's not professional. And he was shocked I did that. And I went up against a couple other big players in the industry as well, and I know you know all that, but I got tired of being called names and being told you can't do this. And I said, well, why not? And when they tried to regulate intervention, it got really crazy because the Pennsylvania board, which has nothing to do with the state of Pennsylvania, said we're going to call it the CIP, the Certified Intervention Professional, et cetera, et cetera. But then they grandfathered everybody in and then turned around and made this certification bachelor's level only. And I said, you can't do that. Your teachers don't have bachelors. You can't have people teaching this with no bachelor's, but the requirement is a bachelor's. And I went toe-to-toe with them. And they revised their entire program based upon that. And this is the kind of stuff like behind the scenes when we're trying to change legislature and we're trying to get some sort of semblance of order in the colleague side. We can't get people on the same playing field. And it's like, it's that whole mentality of I'm going to do it and I want to be in charge because my ego is so huge. And I want everyone else to step back and do what I want them to do. So not only do we have the media portraying us as negative, we have the advocates rolling with that on social media as negative, and then you have colleagues attacking each other instead of helping each other. And it's been so crazy trying to get everybody on the same page. My goal was to create an army of people that are trained and educated on some level that they could help correctly and ethically, as opposed to throwing spaghetti at the wall going, I hope this sticks, because that's kind of been our model up to this point. And it's really trying. And you're seeing that as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I really am. And I think that what's frustrating is while we are going through this cultural shift and paradigm change, the numbers just keep going up on the overdoses and the ability to, constrain the further spread of addiction in this country is, to some degree, I've argued people at government and in private sector are complicit in this because no one can get out of their own way. Everyone has an agenda that's personal, and their agenda really should be what really is in the best interest of the patient as a clinical decision. If a doctor wants to be a doctor and cannot agree to treat somebody based upon accepted medical models, that person shouldn't be a doctor anymore, or should call themselves something else. And so you have therapists and whatever, and that, Cal, it really begs a point that we have allowed far too long, and I understand why, the brain sciences to be an art and not a science. And, everyone thinks they have their own methodology, they have their own secret sauce, their own formula, and they don't, because every human being is a universe unto him or herself, and they're all going to respond differently to different things. It's not like if you do a longitudinal study and 99 out of 100 people responded positively to a medication. We're not dealing with medications. We're not dealing with physical interventions. We're not even dealing with brain wiring yet. We're dealing with simply having talk therapy and getting people motivated to help themselves. Now, yes, you have Vivitrol and all these other drugs that have all the promises of stopping the cravings and giving someone the focus and the ability to start getting their act together. I am hopeful that is true. I'm not overly confident for the long term. I think it's a very short-term fix that Congress has latched onto because they don't know what else to do. But then everyone else backs down and says, oh, good, we have Vivitrol now and these other drugs.
Right.
How did methadone work out for us? And so you have people like yourselves who, if I need someone, I'd call you, Cali. If I had a problem with my kid, I'm calling you and saying, look, here's my kid. Here's the situation. Here's what I need. Now, but what differentiates you, let's say, from any other person who plays interventionist? It's, your reputation, our repertoire with each other, how it works out. But you have plenty of people. This goes right back to your initial question of patient brokering, who are great salespeople. We have a joke that people with addictions can sell ice to an Eskimo.
Yeah.
They're great salespeople, and they can say, hey, I've been through recovery. I've been through it. This is the best program ever. You should follow me. I got your kids back. And that person's getting paid. That's not altruistic. They're getting paid to make that referral.
And I'm going to stop you right there. When I teach intervention, I tell every person you are not allowed to be tethered to a treatment center. You must give 3 choices to that family, and you better not be paid by any of them. Because as soon as you do that, you are double dipping. And that is completely unethical. So when I train people, I tell them, if you're a marketer for a treatment center, you better be a W-2, number 1. And then that is your referral source. You're not charging the family. So a lot of people are shocked when they come to class and they say, wait a minute, I can't, because they're getting paid by 3 treatment centers as marketers at $5,000 pop, making $15,000 a month, and now they want to advertise as an interventionist. And I say, that's unethical. We got to talk about that.
Yeah.
And they're shocked.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? Well, that's what I'm trying to portray and get, this side of the industry, which is what we're both seeing. But we are out of time. So how can my listeners find you? How can they hire you? How can they talk to you? Where are you at?
Well, my website is, I have 2 websites. There's soberlawnews.com. That's my blog where I post on everything and anything that has to do with the industry and people. It's searchable. People can look at that. You also have my law firm, which is, it's my law firm. Technically, it's Beighley, Myrick, Udell and Lynne. It's bmulaw.com. And the phone number, I should give my email. It's jdlynn@bmulaw.com. But, I really recommend that anyone who has any information or questions to go first to the blog, get to know who I am, what I do, information for themselves. And that's what that Sober Law News website's done. I also cannot recommend enough that people start really taking a serious look at the National Recovery Council website and start understanding what that is and recognizing that I believe, which is why I've attached my name to it only because I believe in it, is that's the answer to starting to undo the damage that has occurred to people like yourselves and the treatment industry in general, as well as to patients for generations. And we're just continuing it. So I'm easy to find. I'm easy to Google. I'm easy to help also. People call me all the time just for questions. I'm happy to help them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on the show, and we'll post all of your links up with the show so everyone can find you. And again, you're listening to Unpause Your Life with Dr. Cali Estes and Jeffrey Lynne. Hey, everyone. Thanks again for listening. I really hope you enjoyed the show today. Head on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a comment or review of what you think. Or contact us at 1-800-706-0318. If you want to be on our show, feel free to email or call. And if you have a topic, feel free to email or call as well.
Thanks for listening to Unpause Your Life. For show notes and more, head on over to unpauseyourlife.com.
Big shout out to recoveryinnovators.com for help producing this show. Thank you, guys.
I took a walk down the long road where they said that I shouldn't go. On my way found a reason to wake up another day. But they needed to show you down the dark road where they said that I shouldn't go. I knew the dangers of flying. Now I'm so far from solid ground. But they needed to show you all the things that you won't do. Find faith or religion, but nothing to show for it. No need to escape in love with my pain. I may be weak, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gate. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just not so hard to believe. To believe. No need to escape with my pain. I may be weak, but I'm alive, still alive, and I won't be bound by your mistake. No, I won't be your enemy, trapped at the gates. Bring me to life, put me to death. Just give me something that's just